Do I have any Boy Scouts? We'll get John Albers to lead us in the pledge. He's a Boy Scout. We'll get Ricky Burnett to come lead us in the pledge. Yes. And then I'll call Albert next. Welcome to the Monday, August 27th meeting of the Mayor and City Council of the City of Roswell. I would like to invite Ricky Burnett to come forward and lead us in the pledge. We'd all stand and face the flag. Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. And Ricky, if you'd come to the microphone, I'd like John Albers to come and make an announcement. Ricky, don't leave. Don't run. This isn't bad.
Congrats. Mr. Mayor and Council, I would like to thank you for giving us a few minutes today, Councilwoman Wynn especially for the invitation. I am very proud to report that our very own Deputy Chief Ricky Burnett has been named to the EMS Region 3 Council, which represents obviously the North Fulton area. A little bit of history. Back earlier this year, what's called MROC, which is an association of all of our fire chiefs, had a meeting and asked for me to attend to help out on how we could get representation from our fire departments. Unanimously, that group of chiefs chose our very own Deputy Chief Ricky Burnett as being the leader, the EMS expert, and the person that all 6 cities wanted to represent them on that EMS council, which for many years we were denied that ability and that representation. And it took us a little longer than possible, but thanks to Commissioner Rob Pitts and some others, we were able to get him on. So congratulations to you, Chief Burnett.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Ricky, you going to say anything? Okay. I'm going to let Councilmember Wynn say something to close this out.
Well, first of all, I'd like to thank State Senator John Albers for seeing the best of the best in our own Chief Burnett. We've seen it for a long time, and I'm so glad he's got that recognition. I know he's going to serve North Fulton very well on this board, and we're so very, very, very proud of you.
Next, I'd like to call Councilmember Rich DiPolito for a recognition. Oh, disapproval? That's not a recognition? No. All right, we'll get back to the real business in a minute. I thought that was I moved too quickly. Do we have a motion to approve the consent agenda? Motion by Councilman Orleans. Is there a second?
Mr. Mayor?
Mr. Mayor.
Yes, is that a second?
I would like to suggest we pull item number 2 off the consent agenda.
2 is off the agenda? Do we have a second to approve the consent agenda with the removal of 2?
Second.
Second. Does anyone in the audience have any questions regarding the consent agenda? Seeing no questions, is there all in favor raise their hands? That's unanimous. We'll next call upon Councilmember DiPolito to bring up the item 2 from the consent agenda and also the EARN program.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This is item number 2 from the consent agenda, which is approval for the mayor and/or city administrator to sign a master lease agreement with Dell Financial Services to replace the city's desktop computer systems. And I'd like to call on Mr. Lee to describe that for us.
Thanks, sir. Good evening, Mayor and Council. What we have before you tonight is a proposed lease from Dell Financial Services. The term of this lease is 4 years. The annual payment is $93,652. This particular lease is known as a fair market value or rotational lease. This lease reduces our true cost of ownership for computers, protects the city against technology obsolescence, improves the repair and maintenance efficiencies of the IT division, as well as supports the compatibility with the ERP system. The savings per unit is $168.98, and for the replacement cycle, the net present value savings are $62,000. If you have any questions about the lease, I'll be glad to answer those.
So these are the equivalent of desktop units for the monitor and the computer, about $168.
Yes, sir, that's true.
Sounds like a pretty good price to me.
Yes, sir, it is.
Does the council have other questions? Do we have a motion?
I would like to make a motion to approve, but before I do so, I just wanted to point out that our staff has done a good job of going out and looking at other ways to save the city some money, and this will save not just monetarily, but it's going to save in staff time, because having all of our computers on the same operating system minimizes the number of conflicts that we have. It also reduces the amount of help that each individual desktop is required, and it also enables us to push out significant amounts of data and updates to each of the computers. So rather than doing this all individually, spending a lot of staff time doing that, we're going to save a tremendous amount of time just having a simple system as well as saving some money. So good job, and I move to approve.
Yes, sir.
Motion by Councilmember DiPolito for approval. Is there a second? Second by Councilmember Orleans. Does anyone in the audience have any questions or comments? All in favor of the motion, raise their hands. Passes unanimously.
Thank you.
The next item is approval of the Employees Acting on Roswell Needs EARN program. Ms. Love.
Thank you, sir. And with me I have Captain Combs, who's going to be a co-presenter. And the EARN program, which is Employees Acting on Roswell's Needs, is an incentive program to encourage employees to identify cost savings for the city and ultimately increase efficiency in delivery of services. And this program came about from the Compass Group. And the Compass Group is a leadership group that I meet with every month, and it's made up of the best and brightest leaders in each department. These are folks who have been identified as leaders who have positive influence, who are innovative in the workplace, and who bring a significant ability to take a look at things in a different way. So certainly the status quo is not an option for anybody in this group. One of the first initiatives that they came up with was this program. It was brought to the group by Captain Combs. So I'd like for her to explain a little bit about it as well. If you are a member of the Compass Group, if you would stand up right quick and we'll put you on the spot. There's about 20 so of them, so this is a few of them. So I will turn it over to Captain and let her explain.
The EARN program is basically an incentive program that encourages employees to think outside the box and to try to come up with ways to save the city money. It can also be through efficiency gains and saving the city time and manpower hours as well. And part of the encouragement in it is an incentive-based program in which the employee will receive a percentage of the savings for basically a one-time award for the savings, whether it's a repetitive savings or not. So if an employee submits an idea and the board determines that it is a good cost-saving measure, the idea will be implemented for a 6-month period of time to prove that it is in fact saving the city money, and at that time the employee can be given the award. If it's going to be a cost savings measure that will be repeated over several years, they'll get a 10% award based on whatever the cost savings would be, and if it proves to only be basically like a one-time cost savings, they get a 5% award. And if it's a manpower or efficiency gain, then they can be given an award either through PTO or possibly gift cards and things of that nature. So,
is there a cap?
There is no cap. We have removed the cap from it.
There is no cap. One of the things that is important to remember is EARN program submissions have to be above and beyond someone's regular duties. So as part of anyone's regular duties, there's an expectation that we always look for those efficiencies. But this would be something innovative. It could be in another department. It could be in another area of responsibility. An example might be taking a manual, costly process and through technology or through changing that process, winding up not only saving time but money. The cap would be the percentage.
Concern. If there is no cap, what could the potential commitment be from this council to fund this?
It would be 10% of those savings.
So what could that potentially
We
be?
really don't, I mean, if someone saved $1 million, then 10% of $1 million. Obviously, the council will have to approve those payments once a recommendation has been made. We took the cap, there was a cap based on the Forsyth program. We took that off. Actually, you brought that up, Mr. Mayor, at the committee meeting. Sir.
5 is one thing, but let's say if it's $100,000, that's a major commitment from this council.
It is.
I think we need to think about the cap. I want to have a generous cap, but on the other hand, because it's not a council decision, it's the council's committed to do it.
Correct.
I hate to commit council to do something that's $100,000 or potentially more.
Understood.
And I look forward to some great savings, and it may well be worth it, but it's hard to commit this council. If someone gets this and it says, I didn't get it, the council said they were going to do it, $100,000 is a whole different matter than $5,000 or $10,000. So I hope, I'm sorry if I don't want to pour cold water on this because I support the concept. I know, but as stewards of the taxpayers' money, I can't commit to $100,000.
We understand there are limitations. A cap, like I said, when the original policy, the draft was brought forward, there was a cap, so our expectation was that there would be some cap. So we understand that, and we'll put in whatever number council deems appropriate.
Well, I'll leave that to council's discretion. I just know with no cap, that could be a major commitment, and I'm not sure no cap is appropriate, given that this is
Understood.
taxpayers' money. All right, other questions the council may have? I think we're looking for either a motion or a motion with a cap. Councilmember Nguyen.
We were just discussing, I'm just throwing this out for a suggestion of 10% or $20,000, whichever is, I'm thinking less. So if it comes into $100,000, they would get $20,000. If it's $100,000, then, they get 10% of that. So I'm just throwing that out for a suggestion.
And okay, you're limited in approval, what, 25,000?
Yes, sir.
So this would be, in essence, going, within that 25,000, but that sounds like a reasonable number.
It is very reasonable.
Other thoughts? Is there a motion?
I move to approve the EARN program policy with adding a cap under item B4 of $20,000.
So under, whether it's 5% or 10%, the max is 20,000.
Yeah, the 10%
I'm
and the
looking forward to
5%
paying
are...
$20,000 out, honestly.
I'm sorry, the 10 and 5% is addressed in item number 3.
Right. And the cap, whether it's 5 or 10 or whichever program, is 20. We have a motion. Do we have a second? Second by Councilmember Nguyen. Further discussion. Councilmember Price.
I think anytime we have economies, that's great, but I'm trying to figure out what sorts of things it would include. For instance, if we were evaluating several courses of action and, they had different costs to the city, and one of them had been recommended by a person, then I guess it muddies the water if we would select that course of action, potentially.
I'm not sure I understand.
I guess I'm trying to figure out what exactly are the parameters of what would be included in this. Is it
Included
in ongoing operations, or is it in future programming, or what have you?
Any or all. I would imagine that most of them would come through an innovation in the way we deliver a service, through a process or through some kind of technology that's not something we're embarking upon now. There are many things through the budget process or initiatives that departments have going on that certainly if we're looking at it, like let's say for alternative fuel, that is a project that is right now on the books, and we're looking at anything from compressed natural gas to propane. So if somebody comes up with that suggestion, that's not eligible for a submission. Now, maybe we go with one or the others, and 2 years down the road, they come up with some innovative way to have a significant impact on those savings or something. That might be something that would be eligible. It will definitely be on a case-by-case basis. Just because someone submits something and they think it's innovative or cost-saving, that has to be certified, it has to be verified, and the board will take a look at that. And I can tell you from the discussion in the group, they are much harder on their peers than probably I would be. So I can guarantee you that something is not going to be approved unless it is truly innovative and has those potential for cost savings.
For clarification, who sits on this board?
There's a representative from each department. The department heads provided suggestions for up to two persons for each department. There will be a main representative, and then the other person will be an alternate, almost like in training. So we have a farm team, so when they roll off, another person comes on who understands the process. How many people? There will be 8.
8 people on the board, so each department would
Each
have
department is represented.
And those 8 people would have to have a majority decision to say, we believe...
Correct.
Having reviewed this for 6 months, we can see a cost savings of X, and we're awarding them.
And they will not be, while they will be involved in the verification of the cost savings, Keith Lee will be the gatekeeper of that, related to what measurements and methodologies we're using to certify savings.
Keith would do the
Correct.
quantifying, and then they would have to make
Right, we don't let
determination
them...
based upon whether this was truly innovative, it was part of their normal course of events, or they truly qualified.
Right, and the submission would have to give the estimation of what they expect those savings to be and based upon what, and then we'd have to verify that that was actually the case.
Thank you. Other questions?
Just one more.
Councilmember Price.
Do we know, as it's been instituted elsewhere, if there have been any problems with litigation, such as a person submitted something and then maybe it was instituted in a slightly different fashion and then they felt like it was their idea or something like that?
Not to my knowledge, Captain, have you heard?
Forsyth is the only other area that we know of that's been instituting this policy, and they have not had any of those issues.
Mr. Halsey, do you anticipate any problems?
No, Mr. Mayor.
Because it's purely discretionary, and if in discretion they do not award it, then there's no appeal.
That's my understanding. Anybody can file a lawsuit, but we can defend it.
And win it.
That too.
Okay. Other questions? Does anyone in the audience have any questions or comments? Any further discussion by council? Councilmember Price.
I noticed that we modified our exclusions list.
Yes, ma'am. To simplify it. Instead of picking out particular positions, sometimes, as we have had in the last couple of budget processes, we have reorganized, we have eliminated some positions, we have added other positions. So the list of positions that you see that are excluded, part of those positions' normal job duties are to look for innovations and cost savings. Anybody else in that list may look across in another department. Bear in mind, it must not be part of their normal responsibility, something that they would have general knowledge about. That's something they should be doing anyway. But if I work in finance, I may see something in recreation and parks, come up with an idea that's a cost savings, and my position in finance might preclude me from submitting a finance idea, but would not preclude me from submitting something in another department. Sometimes the people that are outside and fresh eyes look upon something are the ones best able to see something like that.
Just for clarification, all elected officials are excluded, correct?
Correct. Elected officials, the city administrator, the deputy city administrator, department heads, and deputy department heads and/or chiefs.
Thank you. All right, any further discussion? All in favor of the motion, raise their hands. Passes unanimously. Thank you for that
we appreciate
idea,
it.
and we look forward to more good ideas. And unfortunately, that does not qualify because that idea came in before we passed this policy.
I'm settled for that.
At this time, we'll call upon Community Development Liaison, Councilmember Nancy Diamond.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This is approval of an amendment to Chapter 5, Article 5.3, Building and Technical Codes, and Section 5.4.39, required inspections of the City of Roswell Code of Ordinances. This is the second reading, and Ms. Wakefield is here to tell us about it.
Thank you. As was mentioned, this is a request for, to approve. This is the second reading for an amendment to the Code of Ordinances, Chapter 5, related to building and construction. This amendment is merely a housekeeping matter, asking that Mayor and Council approve the adoption by reference of the state minimum international codes, and that they also amend the section of Chapter 5 dealing with inspection to reflect, coincide with those state codes. And also, we had an amendment that was approved a month ago where the official name of the chief building inspector was changed to chief building official. So we're asking where that conflict exists, that will be changed.
Mr. Halsey, if you'd read the ordinance.
Ordinance of the City of Roswell, Georgia to amend sections 5.3.1, 5.3.2, 5.3.3, 5.3.5, 5.3.6, 5.3.9, 5.2.11, 5.3.12. I think that should have been 5.3.11, and 5.4.39 of Chapter 5, Building and Construction. The remainder of the ordinance is incorporated herein by reference.
Does the council have any questions? Councilmember DiPolito.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Ms. Wakefield, the state used to use the standard building code, is that correct?
The state, what they call their code is the Georgia State Minimum Standard Building Codes, and they refer to those codes, and it's adopted in their regulations as the International Building Codes with Georgia State amendments, and those are the codes that are published by the International Code Council.
So we're adopting it with the international, with the Georgia
yes,
amendments?
Yes.
And which entity with the state of Georgia adopts these codes? Who is it that decides that this is the code for the state of Georgia?
DCA.
Which
Department of Community Affairs.
All right, thank you. Does the council have any other questions? Councilmember DiPolito.
I was just curious, when did the state of Georgia make that change?
I believe it was either in 2006 or 2007.
So it's been a while.
Yes, sir.
So is this a more stringent code, do you know?
No, sir. The code that previously was in place and the code that's referenced in the city's ordinance is the Southern Building Code, Congress International, and that is a code that no longer exists.
Okay. Thank you.
Any other questions? Councilmember Price.
I'm not sure if it's questions as much as comments about this. Tried to search to find, the genesis of this, and the International Code Council, in conjunction with the National Association of Home Builders, collaborated to make the initial recommendation, and they currently have a public comment period on this that ends on September 24th of this year. So it seemed to me that we may be premature in adopting this prior to that public comment code, since the industry deserves the opportunity to weigh in. And I noticed that the International Code Council is comprised of, it's actually all American, and that's why the name international sort of caught my attention, wondering, well, what are we agreeing to? But it's actually all American city officials is the entity that forms this ICC. And also, the standards are incorporating the National Green Building Standards, which is a voluntary entity, but only, it's voluntary only, but if you adopt it, then it's mandatory. So if we adopt it, what was set up to be voluntary would then be mandatory, and there are a lot of things in that I'm not sure we really want to make mandatory. We've also indicated in here under 5.3.3 that we would adopt Appendix G, which I would guess not many people have read, which I did find on the internet. and it specifically addresses swimming pools, which, if you read it, it gives a lot of opportunities and options for different ways you can enclose your pool, etc. And then one of the options is, and the local standard. Well, if we adopt this without a local standard, then the other standards would be the ones we would be accepting. So I don't know if we have local standards that we would want to adopt at the same time as this, or we're going to leave ourselves kind of open because people will have difficulty in constructing a swimming pool because they can't adhere to these standards. And I mentioned to Alice earlier that a gentleman at the networking thing the other night mentioned to me that he was denied the opportunity to build a swimming pool in Roswell because he didn't adhere to what he was told was the coming standards. And I noticed on the first page also, the summary of this that we're about to adopt, it says it's to reflect the current Georgia state minimum codes and for the inspections to reflect the current inspections that are being performed or will be performed. So does that mean that our current inspections are outside the scope of the current ordinance?
Let me see if I can explain this. The codes that are currently in the Code of Ordinances no longer exist. The city is mandated, and that's to follow the International Building Code as approved by the state of Georgia. This is not anything that's new or are different from any other municipality in the state. It is the mandated state code. If the city decided you didn't want to adopt them, you still have to, every building that's built in the city has to follow this code because it's a state code. We can make our code perhaps more restrictive. We cannot make it less restrictive than what the state requires. There's nothing that's overly cumbersome about this. This is a code that's not just the state of Georgia. It's used in many, 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 many cities. And it's so that you have standard construction safety standards that developers and builders can follow. It's about property safety. It's about making sure that structure is safe and making sure that the city is not liable in the event that the structure is improperly constructed. In case of the swimming pool, I'm not aware of anyone being told they couldn't build a swimming pool, but truthfully be told, there may be situations where the answer is no. You may not meet the setback. There may be something related to the location of the pump versus the pool. There may be an issue related to the location of the deck. It's just that I was not aware that someone had a problem, and the new chief building official had not mentioned to me that someone had a problem. So I'm not really in a position to address that issue because I was not aware of it.
Let me ask a couple of questions. In Alpharetta, Milton, Johns Creek, Sandy Springs, Atlanta, is this International Building Code the building code that's in effect?
Yes, sir.
Councilmember Price raised another question having to do with this green building code. Are we now making mandatory which is voluntary in other jurisdictions?
That is a voluntary code. It's not a mandatory code.
So if we adopt this tonight, will the record reflect that the green building code is voluntary, not mandatory?
Yes, sir. The way the ordinance is structured, those codes that are mandatory are codes under 5.3.1A1 through 12. And then if you go to Section B, and it says number 1, that's the National Building Code. That code, that is placed there so if someone wants to build a green building, those would be the standards that they would follow.
But it's not mandatory?
No, sir.
Thank you. Other questions? Councilmember Orleans. I'll get back to Councilmember Price.
I was going to ask the same questions that you just asked, but what you just said at the end there, that if they want to build a green building, they've got to follow these. So where does the optional come into play, I guess?
They do not have to follow them. That just gives them some standards in which to go by. They do not have to follow them. Again, what they have to follow is the 1 through 11.
Okay.
These would be
These
recommended.
recommended,
but not
yes, sir.
mandatory.
Yes, sir. That's a better word. Yes, sir.
And so is it worded that way, Mr. Halsey?
The wording in B says the following code is adopted insofar as it does not conflict with the Georgia State Minimum Standard Codes.
I guess Mrs. Price's concern is we're adopting it. Mr. Halsey, what we would, if we want to make it clear that it's not mandatory, that it's voluntary, how would we do that?
I would have to take a look at that, Mr. Mayor, because I'm not intimately familiar with this. I would have to check with DCA and see how this fits all the other building code. So I can't give you a quick answer on that.
So if we wanted to adopt everything that we do have a clear answer on and defer the things that Mrs. Price is concerned about, could we do that?
I would recommend, if we need to do that, that we just defer the second reading or just start over. Is there a deadline on this?
Well, there's not so much a deadline, but your regulations do not reflect the current code.
Okay.
So if you want to adopt it and not adopt the National Green Building Standards, that's entirely up to this body. The staff is fine with that.
Here's where we are. I think Mr. Halsey is not comfortable and Mrs. Price is not comfortable that it's voluntary because of the language is a little confusing. So I'm trying to move this forward and meet the objections as to the question of whether it's voluntary or not, and perhaps adopt that at a later time.
Yes.
Well, I would suggest just omit subsection B in its entirety for right now, and then we can come back to that later.
That is an option available to council. Councilmember Price, back to you. I think you had some other comments.
Yes, only that in the National Green Building Standards, it says that they would be mandatory only in as much as it were adopted at the local level. So by adoption, it seemed to me that that would indicate we would be requiring it by their own definition. So that...
Well, I think there's an open question on that is where we are right now.
Right.
Whether it becomes or not, and Mr. Halsey hasn't had a chance to review it.
So I think we would be prudent not to move ahead since if the state of Georgia already has requirements that any builder has to adhere to, I just don't see the rush in adopting this since we, by definition, already have to comply with certain
I
portions
think
of it.
the reason that Ms. Wakefield's bringing it forward as far as the mandatory building code is that we are, in our statute itself, we're referring to something that does no longer exist, which creates a problem in of itself.
Yes, sir.
We're trying to enforce a code which does no longer exist, and now we're out of step with everything else and making it probably more difficult for builders who are used to working with other cities. So I can see a reason to come into compliance with the code rather than having some contradictory information in there. But I also see Councilmember Price's argument that we need to know whether these green building codes are mandatory or voluntary in making a decision. I could see some council members supporting mandatory and some council members supporting voluntary, but I don't think they should be asked to make a decision without knowing for sure which one it is. So I'm suggesting we just adopt the mandatory ones and then further review whether these things are voluntary or mandatory and whether they should be voluntary or mandatory. Councilmember Aguilar, you seem to be poised. And then I'll get back to Councilmember Price.
Well, just a question for Alice. From what you know, and what the voluntary versus mandatory, and if we pass it in as mandatory, can you shed any light on that?
Only thing I can say is my understanding is that they have several codes that you may or may not adopt, and then they have codes that are mandatory. And the National Green Building Standard is one of those codes that is not a mandatory code for a local jurisdiction to adopt.
I'm assuming, I know this, but I don't have the wording behind it, but if you want to have a certification of being a certain type of green building, then that's what you follow. It's not that you
Yes,
have
sir.
to. And some of the other questions, whether if you have to do that, that's your choice. But if you want the certification, you do have to follow this thing.
Yes, sir.
So that's where that comes from. So I don't know to be able to give the exact citation to say that that's the case, but I'm pretty sure that's the way it works.
Other comments or questions? Councilmember Price.
Oh, just that I would like someone to look at that Appendix G carefully with respect to pools.
I will have the chief building official to look at that. I mean, he's the person that's most qualified to look at that, and I will definitely have him to look at that and to report out. I mean, as I said, if you would give me the name of the person, I would be glad to call him and see what his issue was.
Yeah, it was swimming pool materials, which I don't even see addressed in this Appendix G, so I don't know what... Anyway, I'll put you in touch with him.
All right, I want to entertain a motion before I open it up for public comment. Do we have a motion?
I guess pending legal verification, I would move to approve second reading, but for the section on National Green Building Standards, and bring that back.
So this is a motion to approve
All
the
but
mandatory provisions and to not pass at this time the voluntary positions and bring that back for further discussion.
Yes, sir.
Is there a second?
Second.
Motion by Councilmember Diamond, second by Councilmember DiPolito. Does anyone in the audience have any questions or comments? Any further discussion by council? Councilmember Eichelhardt.
Just a question on that. What's our plan then to follow that up? I don't want to just let that fall through and
I
never come back with it.
will go to Councilmember Diamond for her plan.
We will come back with a plan next meeting.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Councilmember Price.
I would urge defeat of this motion due to the fact that we're still in the public comment period until September 24th, and I would urge our building community to take advantage of that time period to input to the ICC their suggestions and recommendations for these codes.
Any further discussion? All in favor of the motion? Councilmember Diamond, DiPolito, Wynn, Orleans, and Eichelhardt. All opposed? Councilmember Price passes 5-1.
Next item is approval of a resolution to accept CDBG funds in the amount of $22,077.21 from prior program years from Fulton County, and approval of budget amendment 2216-2008-27-12 in the amount of $22,077.21. Ms. Wakefield.
This is, as was mentioned, a request to approve a resolution to accept funds and transfer of funds from prior years of CDBG funds with the county 2003 and 2008 in the amount of $22,077.21. This will bring the the funding for the Adult Rec Center Phase 1 project to $739,163.64. We ask that this resolution be approved so we can forward this to Fulton County.
So this is to approve accepting money and spending it at the Adult Rec Center.
Yes, sir.
Is there any questions? Councilmember Price.
What is the extent of Phase 1 of the project?
Phase 1 is the expansion of the recreation area for the Adult Rec Center.
The fitness.
Fitness center. The fitness center.
So it does not include the swimming pool, any portion of the swimming pool?
No.
So these funds would not be used for the swimming pool?
No, ma'am.
Thank you.
City Administrator Kay Love.
Councilmember Price, CDBG funds cannot be used for the therapeutic pool. They do not meet the requirements, so we could not use CDBG funding for the pool.
Any further questions? Do we have a motion?
Move to approve.
Motion to approve the acceptance of the money and spending it on the Adult Rec Center, Fitness Center by Nancy Diamond. Is there a second? Second by Councilman Orleans. Further discussion? Anyone in the audience have any questions or comments? All in favor of the motion, raise their hands. Passes unanimously. Councilmember Kent Eichelhardt, liaison to the Environmental Public Works Department, will come forward with a plan now.
This will be a very specific plan, but we won't hopefully get into too many details of it. It's fairly simple, but Mr. Wolf's up to talk about the approval of updated changes to the Roswell water distribution specifications of the Roswell Standard Construction Specs.
Thank you, Councilman Eichelhardt, Mr. Mayor, member of the City Council. Before you are proposed updates to the Roswell water distribution specifications. These are found within Section 4.0 of the Roswell Standard Construction Specifications. The proposed updates are mainly housekeeping items and relate mainly to new federal standards for lead content in parts such as valves and fittings, and a reorganization of the document for easier reference. And I believe this will be read as a resolution. I'm happy to answer any questions you may have.
Anything specifically that we're changing? Give me an example.
There are new federal regulations for the amount of lead that can be in valves, fittings. They've redefined what that percentage can be. So we are adopting those.
Adopting the federal standards. Well, let's hope this is a simpler discussion than the last standard discussion. Does the council have any questions? Do we have a motion?
I have a question.
Question by Councilmember Price?
Yes, I noticed that we are reducing the number of manufacturers that we're going to allow to be used in the Roswell water system. So I hate to see anything that I perceive as possibly being anti-competitive, and it seems like if they adhere to all these standards, why would we not use them in a competitive process?
That is mainly a cost savings measure, where when we can better specify and limit what types of materials we allow within the system, we don't have to keep all sorts of different models and manufacturer types on hand in case of emergency repairs. So if we can better standardize that list, and within the specifications, we already specify certain manufacturers or a city-approved equal. So we leave it open to all manufacturers, but we specifically call out certain ones in the specifications.
So I guess I don't understand. We're being so specific as to the details of certain fittings, et cetera, but then I would think that if they wanted the business, they would make their items to fit that. So why are we selecting them? Is it just a cost? I mean, why can't we do it through a bid process?
Yeah, it is done through a bid process, but
we're limiting the number of people who can apply.
Well, we're limiting the types of the manufacturers and the model numbers. So any contractor can bid on any project. It's just the types of materials that they're able to put in their bid documents that allow us to have a more standardized and better, more efficient water system, basically.
We're not going to be buying knockoff Taiwanese unknown products. We're going to be buying
unless we approve
unless we approve otherwise. We'll be buying Chevrolets and Fords until we can get parts for them.
And then how do...
Councilmember Price, I'll let you finish
So
that.
a number of these also describe, among the acceptable manufacturers, there are several companies listed, and then it says City of Roswell approved equal. Right. So where does that fit in then if we've already defined the companies that we could use?
That is if for example, a contractor came forward with a product that is not on that approved list that meets all of our technical specifications. That gives us the opportunity to approve that a specific manufacturer or model that is not called out there. So, like I said, it leaves us that flexibility if it meets our specifications.
So I guess I'm wondering why we are naming any at all. I just hate to see government picking winners and losers. It's sort of a bad road to go down when you exclude certain companies, but then it looks like we're saying we could use them, but we're preferring not to. Is that the deal?
I would explain that list of manufacturers as our preferred manufacturers. Like I said, to better standardize our system. We are not excluding any other manufacturer, model, or contractor by making these changes, and we haven't, in fact.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Do we have a motion?
Move to approve the resolution.
Motion for approval of the resolution by Councilmember Eichelhardt. Is there a second? Second by Councilmember Wynn. Does anyone in the audience have any questions or comments? Any further discussion by council? All in favor of the motion, raise their hands. That's Councilmember Orleans, Eaglehart, Wynn, DiPolito, and Price. All opposed. Councilmember Price passes 5-1. This time, we'll call upon Public Safety Liaison, Councilmember Becky Wynn.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This is approval to renew the high-intensity drug trafficking area memorandum of understanding between the DEA and the Roswell Police Department. Chief Orrick.
Thank you, Councilman Wynn. Mr. Mayor and Council, the proposal we have tonight for you is to request consideration to continue a memorandum of understanding to participate in the Atlanta High-Intensity Drug Trafficking Area. It's also called HIDA. It's an initiative throughout Metro Atlanta. It includes over 39 local agencies, 11 counties, and several federal agencies. The resources in this particular program are used for interdiction and arrest of high-level drug traffickers in local communities. Currently, we have 2 officers assigned to the program. We pay their salary, and then the HIDA pays for overtime up to 25% of a federal employee salary at grade 12, step 1, which is $17,000. They also pay for up to $500 operational costs for their vehicle, and any liability claims are defended and covered by the Justice Department. In return, the city receives access to a significant and valuable intelligence network, as we've seen in 2 recent big investigations that occurred here in Roswell, but we also share equally in asset forfeiture proceedings between all the other agencies in each task group.
Does the council have any questions? Do we have a motion?
Motion to approve.
Motion for approved by Councilmember Wynn. Is there a second? Second by Councilmember Price. Does anyone in the audience have any questions or comments? Any further discussion by council? Councilmember Price.
I just was delighted to see the specification of the removal of liability from Roswell, so I'm happy to see that in there. Thank you.
Major Watson did a good job of pulling that together, and I also had him brief me on it to get me up on the Westfall Act and other liability. So
it didn't go unnoticed. Thank you.
Thank you.
Any further discussion? All in favor of the motion, raise your hands. Passes unanimously. This time, we'll call upon Recreation and Parks Department Liaison, Councilmember Jerry Orleans. Everybody's going to get a chance to talk tonight.
It's free-for-all night. Item on the agenda is approval of revisions to the Cultural Arts Center policies and procedures and rules for use. And I believe Morgan Timmis is here to go over this with council.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. I'm also accompanied by Deborah Nia, who's one of the members of the Cultural Arts Board. As you recall, there were a few revisions presented, and there was a conversation at the last meeting regarding the length of time we could book out at the Cultural Arts Center, which was recommended to be increased from 6 months to a maximum of 24 months. And there were some questions and concerns about that raised by council. So the issue was taken back to the board. The board reconsidered it, and they are bringing back the recommendation, the same recommendation to the mayor and council that they brought to you initially, without any changes.
Does the council have any questions? Councilmember Orleans.
Morgan, why don't you go in a little bit about why that returned the same way and what you guys investigated and so forth. Give a little history to the council, a little background.
Okay, I'm going to let Deborah answer that for.
Good evening. We had a very spirited discussion about this. We talked about an exception. We talked about what that would entail, because there'd probably be discussions about fees and fees changing over the time period. And ultimately, there are 4 reasons why we're presenting the same thing to you. The first is that this 24-month window doesn't just double what's currently in place. It's a 400% increase in the time that people can book before their event. So we think going from the window that we have right now, 6 months to 24 months, is already quadrupling the window. Now, if we do this for a year, and it looks like, yeah, maybe the window could be pushed out even more, maybe 36 months, maybe something like that, we can look at it again in another year. The second reason is that it seems like this exception would not benefit very many renters of the facility. Only 3 of our regular users have requested that it be booked more than 24 months, and none of our non-regular users. And when we asked them to elaborate, only 1 of them got back to us. So really, if we put this exception in place or we have it longer than 24 months, we're only benefiting 1 of our users. And in fact, it's not going to benefit really our people in Roswell at all, because that one person said she wasn't going to use it to bring new shows or new events. She was just going to hire better talent to come for the shows that she currently has. So there'd be very little positive impact on the people of Roswell. And then the last reason, the fourth reason, is that if we do grant an exception further out than the 24 months, we already have to get in place their schedule, because the way the policies are written right now gets first right of refusal on all of the dates. And so if we have someone else come in and say, hey, we want something 36 months out, we have to go to get first. We have to get them all booked in for 36 months and then go back to that person, which is just going to be kind of a logistical nightmare at this point. So those are the 4 reasons that we talked about it, and we really strongly recommend that we put forward to you the original proposal, which was increasing it from 6 months to 24 months without any exceptions at this point. And then in a year from now, we can think about looking at it again based on how much it was used this year.
And those other organizations, you've discussed it with them and they're aware of it, and there's not any issues then, correct?
Yes, you're aware it was Nancy Talbert. It was Talbert Yilmaz Dance Company, and I have discussed this with her, and it boils down really to one weekend that is in conflict, possibly in the winter of 13, and we've resolved that issue. That issue doesn't exist any longer.
And Morgan, the other question that came up was going 24 months out, what happens if we have fee increases during that period of time? Do they keep the old fee, or does the new fee take precedence? Can you kind of elaborate on that and how that will work?
The recommendation that was originally brought and is still being put forward allows the fee to be locked in for the 24-month period.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Councilmember Diamond.
Thanks so much for being here and giving us the background on it. There was a comment made in the last presentation that one of the reasons was that so the city presentations would have first right of refusal. Does that mean the city presenting programs would have the same 24-month window?
Everyone would have the same 24-month window.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Do we have a motion?
I move for approval of the revisions to the Cultural Arts Center policies and procedures and rules for use.
Motion for approval by Councilmember Orleans. Is there a second? Second. Second by Councilmember Eichelhardt. Anyone in the audience have any questions or comments? Any further discussion by council? All in favor of the motion, raise their hands. Passes unanimously. Oh, that was a question. We're withdrawing the vote. There's a question before we vote.
Just regarding the locked-in fees, is there no way to have that float to the current amount when the event actually happens?
What we decided was that to encourage people to book out for 24 months, that it would give the groups consistency. Many of us would, when placed in the same situation, if we couldn't lock something in, we'd be highly unlikely to book something out 2 years from now if we didn't know what our rate would be. And so that gives our users certainty in this economic market.
And we actually haven't had any requests to book anywhere near 2 years out, other than from George Ensemble and their 2-year resident company contract and this one user.
What are our resident companies? You said we have 4.
Just George Ensemble Theater. And Atlanta Wind Symphony.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions before we take a vote? Any discussion? All in favor of the motion, raise their hands. Passes unanimously.
Thank you.
This time we'll call upon Councilmember Betty Price, liaison to the Transportation Department.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The first item under transportation is approval for the mayor and city administrator to sign the annual resurfacing contract with Northwest Georgia Paving Incorporated in the amount of $1,827,610. And I do not see Steve Asenbrack, but our transportation department is here in force.
Thank you, Councilwoman Price. Good evening, Mayor and Council. 7 bids were received, ranging from $1,827,610 to $3,060,842. Northwest Georgia Paving, Inc. was the lowest responsible bidder in the amount of $1,827,610. The total quantities in the bid package will provide roughly 14 centerline miles of resurfacing for 2-lane roads. The scope of work includes items found in the city's paving contracts such as patching, milling, striping, adjusting the height of manhole covers, leveling, and traffic control. Based on the final field conditions, the contractor will stop at a point where the total contract is met. I could talk a little bit about the road rating process and the resurfacing process.
Let's do that briefly. First, do you have a list of the roads which have been earmarked? Good.
Here's a map of the roads, and they're shown in red. And then we have a list of about 83 roads that will go down the list in order from the worst road rating to the next worst and on down the list as far as we can go within the $1.8 million.
And how is this rating compiled?
The Transportation Department has a yearly road maintenance program based on the pavement network condition and rating and the available budget. The rating condition is the condition rating is arrived at with the use of MicroPaver, a computer program that provides street conditions based on inspection results. MicroPaver was developed by the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, and it's widely supported by the American Public Works Association. Each street is measured and visually inspected by our inspectors every year. MicroPaver has 19 different distresses and 3 severity levels, and the results are on a scale from 0 to 100, with 100 being the best and 0 being the worst. And so it has a pavement condition index, and the higher the...
Which is the worst road in Roswell, just out of curiosity?
Well, let's see.
Who's at the top of the bottom or top of the list, depending on you perspective?
Saddle Creek Court.
All right, Saddle Creek Court. The paving is on your way.
It has a rating of 15. Number 2 is Roswell Commons Way. It has a rating of 19.
Councilmember Orleans.
Question for you. Since our contract came in at $1.8 million, and is the lowest one of all the bidders, and we've got more in the budget, why are we not doing more streets under this contract? It appears to be a competitive contract, and we've got money to do additional roads, so why would we wait another 6 months or a year to do?
We were a bit behind on this current award of the contract by about 2 months. The current contract that we are voting today, we recommend awarding today, is actually was based on the 2012 year budget, fiscal year budget. So what was approved for 2013 will be the next contract. It's coming up. Roughly about $1 million that is going to be left.
I guess what I'm saying is I don't, of course, remember the exact numbers, but I don't think it was $1,827,610 that was approved in the budget. So I guess I'm just saying, For example, if it was $2 million, why aren't we spending the $2 million to get more roads done at this price is what I'm trying to get to.
The prior year, in fiscal year 2011, we actually had exceeded the limits of what was budgeted for. So that ate into the some of the dollars on the 2012 year budget. So what we got left for 2012 budget year was roughly $1.9 million. And that's what this project was based on.
So the reference to the additional money is in the 2013 budget?
Yes, sir.
And that you're going to do the separate contract on that?
That's
and
correct.
When will that be done?
We plan to have that thing going in the winter, being advertised in the winter, so be ready for the spring.
Okay. Thank you.
We'll spend all the money.
I understand that. I'm just trying to see if we can get them done quicker and better. And
All right, other questions for staff? Councilmember DiPolito.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yes, I have a couple of questions. One, we had talked in committee a couple months ago, I think, about a protective coating we're going to put on the streets. Does this include that?
This is separate. Neo's going to explain.
The coating is being advertised separately. I think it's ongoing right now. It's being in the works and purchasing department.
A separate bid?
Yes, sir. It's a different specialty.
Okay, because I think we had anticipated including that coating in the amount we had budgeted.
That's correct. That will be, we have enough money for it.
Okay,
yes.
That's good. My second question is, I noticed Cherry Street never makes the list, and Cherry Street is a wreck.
It's not really defined street. It's basically patches of parking lot overlapping the others. If that need to be done, we can use our in-house forces to do the work.
Is that not considered public right-of-way?
It is, but there, at one time we were internally, I think the department was talking about improving that roadway, and the final decision had not been made by Mr. Eisenberg.
Well, I think improving it would be fabulous, but in the meantime, it's really rough. It's probably by far the worst street in the city.
You're probably right. It's just no well-defined roadway in that area. It's just a bunch of parking lots put together and overlapping. Well, we have been responding to the maintenance call as we get them.
Okay, so we don't have plans to either redo the street or maintain it better at this point?
I think we do, but if need be, we can use our own forces to do the work because we had a smaller paver that can fit well in that street.
Okay, I guess I would like to see it either make the list or make improvements. I know there have been some ideas to really improve the street, make significant changes to it, which I support.
Well, I certainly would discuss that with Mr. Eisenberg if he doesn't have any other plan to improve that totally. At one time, we were talking about bring it up to standard on the width and the curb and gutter. Right. I think including the condition of the asphalt there, we have some drainage issue too. That
we actually need to redesign.
That's correct.
This isn't just resurfacing, it's a new road.
It had to be engineered to... I hate to see the money being spent on resurfacing it, and the drainage issue is not totally resolved.
Okay, so we have other issues we need to solve first.
That's right, and on top of all that, they're not well-defined right-of-way on that location.
Bigger issues.
Okay, we'll keep working on it.
That's right.
All right, thank you.
Other questions? Councilmember Orleans.
Just follow up on that point. I thought the issue was that was a private street, private parking lots, and it wasn't even a city street or wasn't a city issue. Am I not remembering that correctly?
By the time I got here, it had been maintained by our forces for quite a while. So.
It had been maintained by our forces for quite a while?
Prior to me coming on board, I've been here almost 6 years.
We didn't maintain it very well, though, did we?
Well, it's like you said, it patches a parking lot. There's no real profile on that. It was just a bunch of paved area that being added on by adjacent property.
So has the whole issue been researched so we know whose responsibility it is, or if it's a private street or private parking lot, or if it belongs to the city to take care of? Do we know that?
Based on the maintenance record, we had been maintaining part of it, if not all of it.
For over 7 years? I
For
think that's
several
kind of-
years, for several years prior to...
Why don't we put this on the list of projects to research? Because I don't think
Yes.
we're going to get all the answers tonight.
Yes.
Councilmember Price.
Yeah, I was just going to say, my recollection was that when the department presented a plan to improve that street, it was a lot of widening. It was going to remove all of their parking for the elderly home, and there were going to be some problems with the dumpsters, et cetera, at the restaurant. Widening that road wasn't going to help them a whole lot. It might allow traversing it
It's
a
a
little
narrow
better.
street, it has quite a bit of parking along it, there would be impacts to parking and possibly buildings, but we will address that.
Well, I guess even if the road isn't widened, it probably doesn't need to have potholes, if that's the concern.
Well, I guess the point is this, the council's got to decide what to do. But first question is, who owns it? And then I think the recommendation is, if we do something, it's not just a resurfacing project, it's a redesigning the street, and that includes how wide a right-of-way does the council want. So I think I would encourage the Transportation Department to look into what the options are. I think there are concerns that if we try to widen it too much, we create other problems. But on the other hand, I certainly agree that we don't want to just patch a problem. We need to solve the problem.
We will address that and we will bring it back to council.
All right. Other questions for council? Do we have a motion?
Yes, I'd like to move to approve the annual resurfacing contract with Northwest Georgia Paving in the amount of $1,827,610.
Do we have a second? Second. Motion by Councilmember Price and then second by Councilmember Orleans. Does anyone in the audience wish to comment? Yes, come forward, please.
Just to clarify, Cherry Street, my office was on there 25 years ago. 25 years ago, Cherry Street was considered a driveway with a name. Nothing's changed. It was owned by the building that I rented from, the parking spaces, the parking across the street parallel next to the nursing home, and the home that fronted onto Highway 9 were considered private driveways. All the way down, the little bit of directional parking and next to where the Swallow at the Hollow is was always considered private parking lots. I don't think anything has changed since 1979 on that street, and I don't think any blacktop's been poured either. However, it was never a public street 25 years ago. It was simply a driveway with a name on it.
Thank you for that information. Any further discussion by council? All in favor of the motion, raise your hands. Passes unanimously. I think Cherry Street may be in the same category as the alley behind Market, behind the Dunkin' Donuts, that back street, and we made the decision on that we'd asked them to bring it up to city standards, and we probably need to treat both cities similarly, because they're both have a similar problems. But I think it is worth further review. And if we don't own it, it's certainly questionable whether we should be paving it. Next item?
Next item is approval of a resolution to abandon a portion of Old Roswell Road.
Thank you, Councilwoman Price. When we built West Side Parkway, we relocated Old Roswell Road further away from the creek, and there was a stub of the old road that remained, and what we're about to talk about is removing a part of that stub that's closest to West Side Parkway. This is a map that shows a trail along the creek and a trailhead off of that, and this is the stub that we're referring to, and the a portion to be abandoned is the part that's down in this area closest to West Side Parkway. This is West Side Parkway, and this is Old Roswell Road relocated, and this is the old location of Old Roswell Road. Mansell Partners is the owner of a property on both sides of the terminated portion of Old Roswell Road. They're now requesting that the city vacate the former right-of-way since this portion of the road was relocated when West Side Parkway was constructed several years ago. The city accepted a greenway easement from Mansell Partners on April 23, 2012, but has not yet fulfilled the terms of the easement by taking the action to vacate or abandon the former right-of-way. The permanent easement provides the city with a significant link to the Foakiller Creek Trail system, and the abandonment would enable Mansell Partners to consolidate their two ownerships, formerly split by the road, for more efficient development.
So this is not just an abandonment, it's an exchange.
It is. The hatched area shown here is about 125 feet wide for the trail easement. And this is the stub, and this is the 60-foot right-of-way to be abandoned. That's the lower end of the stub.
Do we have a trail easement to connect to this to the north?
Clyde, can you answer?
The answer is not yet. There's about a 79-foot gap between this and the city park to the property.
And there's another property owner that owns that 70-foot gap.
The Moksha Restaurant is the current plan.
They may want us to abandon some property in front of them.
Okay.
So there's a possibility of exchange down the road. Because we're not abandoning the property in front of Moksha. Thank you. Other questions? Councilmember Orleans.
Just to clarify, that parking lot that was on the other map, the other picture, is what's on the city property. That parking lot there, just above the abandonment will give access to the city park, right?
The parking lot that's just to the north of the abandonment is the Moksha Restaurant's parking lot. The parking lot that's drawn on the drawing is a concept that we have for a trailhead for the trail at some point. The trailhead, our earlier concern was that we might keep this abandoned portion for a trailhead, but the new park that we accepted, which was Dotsey Garner Mills Park, which is 7 acres of land, is much better suited for a trailhead.
Right, but I thought put your finger back on that parking lot there, the other one. I thought that part of that was on city park property now, and I thought we were going to I thought Parks Department was going to try to use that for parking as well to access the park, because from there straight down to the creek is some beautiful land. So my question is, none of that is on city park land, or will we have easement to that park?
We'd really like to talk to the people who own that parking lot and to make some sort of arrangement with those people. And I've been playing phone tag with those people for the last week or so to try to make some sort of arrangement with those people. When the restaurant went closed, it went into some sort of a bank action, and I don't know how to get to those people.
Okay, well, how does this relate to the Mansell property that we're abandoning? They have no access to this parking lot at all then?
The road part in the drawing exists. That's still the existing road. We're not abandoning that portion of the road. It still exists.
Well, I guess my point, what I'm getting to is there two different owners, so we don't have any leverage on our abandonment to get easement to use the parking lot then, is what I'm trying to get to.
A question. If we wish to abandon the property in front of Moksha and do a similar exchange with them, will we be in a position to abandon the road even though it is serving this Mansell Road properties?
Yes, we could do that.
So we still have some leverage with Moksha if they want to get some more property, and I think that's where the real option is, once they get somebody that makes a decision.
Yeah, that's what I was trying to clarify. The ones we're talking about now have no access to it, so we have no leverage with them.
The ones we're talking about now have access on the new road and on that road, and so they don't need it. Basically, what they'd like to do is be able to consolidate this whole piece. It's square, and it's much more developable and a better site for them.
They have no access to the restaurant property, so we have no leverage with them. Okay. And my other point was, I thought we already had the easement for the trail going across that restaurant property that was given to us in a rezoning we did many, many moons ago.
That's on the opposite side of the creek.
Yeah, on the other side of the creek, we have an easement all the
When-
way down the other side of the creek.
Well, that would have been before my time, because we didn't get any rezoning for Lick Skillet.
We didn't what?
We didn't rezone the Lick Skillet property, so we never had the leverage to...
We rezoned the Lick Skillet property. I could swear we did. And it was to put a little conference center along with the restaurant, and...
There is, I just don't
And we
recall.
got an easement through that property on the creek, because I used to push for an easement with any rezoning that was on the creek.
Maybe, let's research that and see if we can find it.
I'd be happy to research that.
So that was the only point I was going to make.
I hope we find it, and I appreciate
Thank you.
your bringing that to our attention. I had forgotten about it. I thought I knew where all the easements were hiding.
My memory's not getting totally shot yet.
We do, I don't know if y'all are working on it, but we have asked in the past to try to have a GIS of all easements. So they say that they are not lost and forgotten once Councilmember Orleans goes on to his promised land. Councilmember Price.
Can you clarify for everyone here the extent of the recent donation and any other city-owned properties or easements?
Could you narrow the question? I'm not sure I understand the question. That's pretty broad.
I'm just trying to figure out with that red line with the dots on it, is that already an easement or already owned by the city? The trail?
The red line is a concept of the trail on that side. It's just a concept. We own...
But we do or don't own that?
Graphic.
We do not. We own part of it because part of it's on the Thompson, is it Dottie Thompson?
Dottie Garner.
Dottie
Dotsie Garner.
There's the park property. Here we go.
Yeah, this one shows the park property that was donated by Mike Mills, Dotsie Garner Park. It has a creek in the middle of it and a pond that we don't own, and as currently undeveloped, we put a sign on it just recently. This easement here in slash is the easement that was proposed to us and accepted by the city from the Mansell.
And we need to give it back if
properties.
we don't accept this property.
That's probably right. It would not take place. And so there's, I'm not sure you can see it in the graphic, but this says 79 feet from there to there. And if we already have an easement on that, make my day. That would be great. But that's the part that we don't yet have at least a signed easement that I'm aware of. But if we...
And we have something to trade for.
They're interested in the sign. That's what I've been working on for about 2 years.
Other questions?
Theoretically, yes, we might have it.
Do we have a motion?
Yes, I'd like to move that we approve a resolution to abandon that portion of Old Roswell Road as shown.
Motion to approve the abandonment. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Councilman Orleans. Anyone in the audience have any questions or comments? Any further discussion by council? All in favor of the motion, raise their hands. Passes unanimously. Have a report from our city attorney.
All right, Mr. Mayor.
I think we pulled this boundary line agreement, didn't we?
Well, yes, we did. At your request, we're
Ten
deferring
is
that.
off.
Recommendation for closure, discuss personnel and acquisition of real estate.
Do we have a motion for closure? Motion by Councilman Wynn. Is there a second? Second by Councilman Dippolito. Everybody in favor, raise their hands. No, that library, we pulled it. We need to get a clarification on the easement. This is on motion for closure. All in favor of motion for closure, raise their hands. Councilman Orleans, are you abstaining? All in favor, that's Councilmember Price, Eichelhardt, Wynn, Dippolito, and Diamond, all opposed. Councilmember Orleans is opposed, passes 5-1. We're going to closure. We have a work session in room 220 now, and we have exciting plans to bring forward to the council and the citizens. I encourage you all to see it. It's one of the most exciting plans